Well, it is so good to be back here again. This is just a beautiful place, and I feel God's Spirit here. And just take a moment to acknowledge our Savior. Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to gather together in your name. We ask that your Spirit will be with us. Let the words that are spoken not be mine, but yours, and let our hearts be receptive. We ask in the worthy name of Jesus and for his sake. Amen. You know, have you ever thought about how fortunate we are to be made in the image of God? He said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness. That is a tremendous honor, and it distinguishes us from all the animals. You know, if you look at the brain, let's just talk about the brain. The human brain versus the brain of an animal. And animals have very well-developed midbrains because the midbrain allows you to react. And that's why animals can react so quickly and move so quickly, do things. We're a little slow. You know, I mean, human beings would not survive very well out in the wild. We're like the easiest prey. And, you know, when lions and tigers and things become man-eaters, it's usually because they're old and decrepit and they can't catch anything else. So, but the counterpart is our frontal lobes, our frontal cortices are much bigger than those of other animals because we have the ability to take information and to process that information and to make plans and to strategize and to delve deeply beneath the surface. We don't just have to react to what we can see. However, have you noticed recently that there are a bunch of people who act like animals? You know, they just look at the superficial characteristics. They say things like the most important determinant of your life is your race, something you can't control, as opposed to your character, which is something you can control. That's why Dr. King dreamed of the day when people would be judged on the basis of their character and not the color of their skin. See, folks, we're going backwards. We are going backwards. And, you know, I must say, as a youngster, I was kind of going backwards, too. You know, I was listening to all this stuff, and I wasn't a very good student. I was a terrible student, to be quite honest with you. I was the worst student ever. In fact, the other students loved the fact that I was in the classroom because no one ever had to worry about getting the lowest mark as long as I was there. So it was a comfort to them. But I remember they used to just tease me mercilessly. And sort of the ringleader was the smartest kid. His name was Steve. You guys know this kind of person. You know, after the test, they would come and hold their A in your face and say, come on, let me see yours. You wanted to let them see something, all right. But, you know, my mother believed in me. And she was always saying to me, Benjamin, you're much too smart to be bringing home grades like this. I brought them home anyway, but she was always saying that, you know, she was encouraging. And she didn't believe in excuse making. And anytime we made an excuse, the next thing out of her mouth was a poem called Yourself to Blame. You're the captain of your ship. You control your own life. And my brother and I didn't want to hear that poem, so we stopped making excuses. And what a difference that made. She made us start reading books and submitting book reports. Every week, 2 book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And you know, she would put little check marks and underlines and highlights, and we would think she was reading them, but she wasn't. But But it had the desired effect. As we started reading about people of accomplishment, we begin to realize that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is you. It's not somebody else. Nobody else can determine your future except you. And it's how you relate to all the things that are going on. And I stopped listening to all the people around, the naysayers who said you couldn't make it in this society because society is racist and it's stacked against you. Let me tell you a secret. The people who you have to worry about are the ones who try to tell you that you're a victim and that you can't make it in a society and that somebody else is holding you down. Remember, we are made in the image of God. God has given us everything we need to succeed no matter where you are. And if you have the right attitude, you're going to succeed. You take somebody who has the right attitude, you take everything away from them, and you put them on the street. Guess where they're going to be in a little while? Right back up there. You take somebody who has the wrong attitude, give them everything, and they find their way down to the bottom. That is what the potential is. And that's why it's so important that we develop that potential in all of our young people. Well, I didn't like going to school when I was doing very poorly. I'm reminded of the mother who was having a little argument with her son because he didn't want to go to school. And he said, I hate school, and all the kids hate me, and the teachers hate me. Give me one reason that I should go to school. And his mother said, well, for one thing, you're 42 years old. And for the other thing, you're the principal. But I really didn't like going to school when I was doing poorly. But once I learned to enjoy reading, to enjoy learning, what a difference it made. All of a sudden, I was an A student. All the kids who used to tease me were coming to me saying, Benny, how do you work this problem? And I would say, sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you. I was perhaps a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good to say that to those turkeys. But, I was the same person. And I remember going up to Steve after a test, and I said, Steve, how'd you do? And he said, I got a 91. And I said, well, gee, I got 100. And I said, if you need help, let me know. But, it's really a matter of what do you concentrate on. And, fortunately for me, things went very well. I won a scholarship, TL, went on to the University of Michigan for medical school. Johns Hopkins internship and residency, things were going well. I remember as a resident, though, one evening, it was at the time of the National Neurosurgery meeting, so almost all the attending neurosurgeons were at that meeting in Boston. And, I think there were two that had been left. One of them was covering the peripheral hospital where I was that evening. And a young man in his late teens came in, severely beaten with a baseball bat, unconscious, head bleeding, broken skull, and his brain was swelling, and he was clearly going to die if he didn't have an operation to remove a big blood clot and the contused brain, which was swelling. So I called the attending to say, we have to take this guy to the operating room, but I couldn't reach the attending. I told the operator, find the attending, and I told the head nurse, find the attending. Nobody could find the attending. And there I was, a resident, having never done that type of operation before, but having seen it. I said, Lord, what should I do? I'm not allowed to take this man to the operating room and try to do something myself. And if I do that and it doesn't turn out well, that's the end of my career as a potential neurosurgeon. But, I felt so calm after praying that prayer. Go and save that man's life. And I did the operation, took out part of his frontal lobe, part of his temporal lobe, the blood clot. And it turned out to be successful. And I saw that young man some years later. He was now a psychologist, helping other people. But the point being, that God never leaves you out to dry. There will never be a situation where he will give you a responsibility and leave you there by yourself. He will always provide what you need. And when you realize that, it makes a difference. And, we don't have to worry about our lives either. You see so many people, they're worried they're going to die from COVID or, somebody's going to shoot them or what have you. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about stuff like that. Because who is ultimately in charge? I remember one time I was in the Bahamas. I was speaking at Freeport in the Bahamas. And, the people in Nassau heard I was on the island. They put up such a ruckus that I said I would come to Nassau. So they sent a twin-engine plane. And we were in the plane, myself and the pilot, and we were about 10 miles from the shore when one of the engines went out. And all of a sudden, instead of flying like this, the plane was flying like this, and he was grappling at things, and he turned around and said, "We're in trouble." Well, I knew that already. And, I had already gone deep into prayer. I could see the lights flashing because he had radioed ahead, and they were anticipating a crash landing. And he finally said, "I can't get the nose of the plane to angle down, so I'm going to cut power, and we're going to go into a dive. And then I'll power up before we hit the ground, and the plane will pull up much faster than it normally would since it's listing upward." I said, "Have you ever done that before?" He said, "Nope." But obviously, I'm here, so it worked. And 50 yards onto the runway, the other engine died. So you know what? I'm not supposed to die in an airplane. I came to that conclusion because I was in Alaska one time. And I was on a speaking engagement, and I got there a little early, and our host said, "Would you like to see the glaciers, the Glacier Valley?" I said, "Yeah." So on this little single-engine plane, just me and the pilot, up over the mountains and down into the valley of the glaciers. It was surreal. It seemed like you were on a different planet. It was so cool. And then heavy cloud cover came in, and this plane only flew by sight. It did not fly by instruments. Pilot couldn't see. He said, "I'm going to climb as fast as I can without going into a stall, and hopefully we'll miss the mountain." You're just going through the clouds. You can't see a thing. And, of course, I'm deep in prayer. And we broke cloud cover, and I could see we missed the mountaintop by 3 feet. So if you're afraid of flying, fly with me. You're going to be just fine if you fly with me. But, the Lord is in charge. And that's what we need to understand. There's never a time when we need to be afraid. It doesn't matter what's going on. I remember as a kid, I used to be deathly afraid of dogs. I mean, if I was going to school and there was a dog, I would go all the way back around the block or 2 blocks to try to get away, frequently being late for school because I was afraid of dogs. And then this man told me, he said, "If you just ignore the dog, they won't bother you." I said, "Are you sure about this?" He said, yeah, just completely ignore the dog because they look for signs that you're afraid of them. So there was this one dog on our block, was kind of a vicious dog. Everybody was afraid of that dog. I said, you know what? I'm going to try what that man said. I'm going to walk right past that dog. And I started walking there, and the dog saw me. He started licking his chops. And he came charging after me, barking and snarling. I said, this was a mistake. But I just ignored him. He ran right up to my leg, and then he stopped and he turned and went back on the porch. And that dog never bothered me anymore after that as I walked through there. And I learned something very important that day about fear and about trust and about not fretting, not worrying. You know, we find ourselves right now in a time where so many people are afraid of COVID and that they're going to die. But you know, if you look at the statistics, a year ago, there were thousands of people dying every day across this country from COVID. Now, there are dozens of people dying every day. Thousands, dozens. And yet, if you listen to certain people, you would think the world was coming to an end. What's happening? The imposition of fear. Because that fear, when I was afraid of the dog, it controlled me. It controlled what I could do and what I couldn't do. And when I lost that fear, I could do anything I wanted to do. We do not need to be afraid of COVID. We have found solutions for COVID. We have a lot of treatments for COVID right now. They're starting to get more attention now. Before, all those treatments were pushed aside and said they don't work because you can't develop a vaccine and have an emergency use authorization if you also have something else that works. But now we have the vaccines, and we also still have the things that work, and it's wonderful. You know, I developed a COVID infection last year. My wife did too. And I almost died. I was on the brink of death. And fortunately, I was able to get the monoclonal antibody before it had been approved. President Trump had to sign some special forms. He always says, you know, I saved your life, right? It was really God who saved my life. I don't have to worry about things like that. But when we trust in Him, we also have to work for Him. We have to be His agents wherever we are. We have to be willing to speak up for Him. I remember a few years ago I was in South Africa at a conference of the Academy of Achievement, and one of the speakers was the head of the ACLU. And he was talking about how the ACLU speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves, those who are voiceless. And I asked him at the end of his speech, before the audience, I said, a woman came to me. She was 33 weeks pregnant. That means that the baby was viable outside of the womb. It had been detected that the baby had a neurological malformation. And it was recommended that she get an abortion. So she was on her way to Kansas, which was the only place that would do an abortion on a baby that late in the term. Fortunately, I talked her out of having the abortion. And she had that baby. The baby did need to have an operation, which I performed. The baby's doing fine. She loves the baby, and she's very glad she didn't kill that baby. But I explained that situation to him, and I said, will you, ACLU, speak for that baby? That baby has no voice, no one to speak for it, perfectly viable baby. And he hemmed and hawed, and he ran excuses, but he never would answer the question. So that evening at dinner, he had the misfortune of sitting next to me. And I said, let me make this easy for you. I say, I sometimes operate on little babies that are only 25, 26, 27, 28 weeks gestation, much less developed than the baby I was talking about. And that baby that I was talking about is in the safest place it can be in. These babies are in incubators with maximum support. I said, would you speak for those babies? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I said, but the one who's in the safest place they can possibly be, you can't speak for that one? And he said, well, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I believe that a mother has a right to kill that baby until the second it is born. And I said, would you say that in public? And he said, no. But you know, now they will say it in public. This is what is happening in the society in which we live. And we have to be willing to speak out for every life. All lives matter. You know, some people say black lives matter, blue lives matter. Tell you a secret. Jesus Christ died for everybody. There is no life that he did not die for. You know. And that's what we have to remember. And, you know, I think about people who are despairing about our country and what's going to happen to us and how can we possibly make it in this world. But just remember, if God was willing to spare Sodom and Gomorrah for the sake of 10 people, we're golden. We are good. It is not going to happen. Now, we don't know how he's going to save us, but what we do know is that we each play a role. Everybody has a sphere of influence. And sometimes it means standing up for what you believe in. There are a lot of people who just sort of hide in the corner and hope that nobody calls them a name. That's not being brave. You cannot be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave. You've got to be willing to stand up for what you believe in. And, you know, there are so many things, unfortunately, that it's much easier to hide from. But remember, you have a lot of influence in your sphere with your children. Think about the children right now and what they are facing. Would you like to be a little child today in this atmosphere that we live in? You got to wear a mask so you don't get to see people's facial expressions when they're talking to you. For a little kid, that is a very important part of the socialization process, to be able to correlate what you're saying with how you look. And then you're being told as a little child that you may be carrying some horrible disease. It may not be affecting you, but you can give it to your grandmother. And she may die Well, grandmothers do get older and they do die, okay? It's unfortunate. We don't want that to happen, but it does. And now that little kid feels that they had something to do with their grandmother's death. And then if the kid is white, they're saying, you're an oppressor. You and your parents and your ancestors are oppressors. And they've created all these problems for everybody else. And if you're a minority, you're oppressed. You're a victim. You can't succeed because the society is unfair. It's systemically racist. And then if that's not enough while you're trying to develop your self-image, you may not be a girl or a boy. You don't know what you are. You get to decide. Now, I think it's child abuse myself. I mean, this is what we're doing to people. It's child abuse. And we've got to be willing to speak up for those children. If we don't speak up for them, who will speak up for them? This is what we've got to be thinking about right now. But I have a formula for success for all children, for all adults. It's called Think Big. Each one of those letters means something special. The T is for talent, which God gave to every single person, not just the ability to sing and dance and throw a ball. Nothing wrong with those things, by the way. But intellectual talent. We're made in the image of God. He gave us the ability to think deeply, to solve problems, to solve issues. We can solve almost any of the problems that we have if we use that intellectual capacity and we work together and we don't let people manipulate us and make us think that we're enemies. We, the American people, are not each other's enemies. Certainly, we may have some different opinions. That's okay. But just because that person who lives across the street from you for the last 20 years has a different yard sign, it doesn't mean they're your enemy. We have got to begin to preach that so that we don't destroy ourselves as a nation. The H is for honesty. Leading a clean and honest life. If you don't put skeletons in the closet, they cannot come back out to haunt you. You know, when I became the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and the left came after me, he's buying this expensive furniture. His wife has an office in the HUD building. His children are participating. All kinds of accusations. But you know what? I never worried about them. And they did all kinds of investigations, spent millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. Of course, they didn't find anything because there's nothing to find. And see, that's the wonderful thing. If you lead a clean and honest life, you don't put skeletons in the closet. They cannot come back out to haunt you. You don't have to worry about what anybody else has to say. The I is for insight, which comes from listening to people who've already gone where you're trying to go. If you can learn from somebody else's mistakes, and you don't have to make those mistakes yourself, think how much further ahead you will be. The N is for nice. Be nice to people. Because once they get over their suspicion of why you're being nice, they'll be nice to you too. Okay? And so much more can be accomplished when you're being nice and they're being nice. And can we all just take the niceness pledge? Just raise your hand right where you are. We'll all take the niceness pledge. If the person next to you doesn't have their hand up, you may kick them. Okay? Because it's your last chance. You got to be nice after this. Okay? Now, what did you just agree to do? You're going to be nice to everybody you encounter for 1 week. Spouses included. Everybody for 1 week. Now, what does that mean? That means you're not going to talk about anybody behind their back for a week. Now, some people will stroke out. I understand that. Okay. It means you see somebody struggling, you're going to help them. Men, you're going to hold the chairs for the ladies and open the doors for them. Ladies, you're not going to curse them out when they do that. Bunch of people trying to get on the elevator, you're going to let somebody else get on. And when you get on the elevator, you're not going to act like you never saw the numbers change before. Speak to people. You may have to practice CPR, but speak to people. Say something to them. You're going to get in your car. The parking lot is jam-packed. 3 people following you in their car because they want your space. When you get in the car, you're not going to pull down the mirror and open the glove box. Just get out of the space and let them have it. You know? But, instead of reveling in your power, you're thinking about others. Isn't that the secret? Think about others first. The K is for knowledge, which is the thing that makes you more valuable. The B is for books, which is the mechanism for obtaining that knowledge. The second I is for in-depth learning, learning for the sake of knowledge and understanding. And the G is for God. We live in a society that is trying to kick God out. That does not work. That does not work for anything. I remember as a youngster, one of the big problems I had was with my temper. I would get so angry that I just wanted to inflict harm on whoever was causing my problem. I remember once a fellow hit me with a rock. It didn't hurt, but I was incensed that he would dare hit me with a rock. And I picked up a rock and I hurled it at his face, broke his glasses, almost put his eye out. Another time, a fellow was trying to close my locker at school. I didn't want it closed. I hit him in the forehead with my fist. Unfortunately, still had the lock in my hand, put a 3-inch gash in his forehead. Almost got expelled for that. Tried to hit my mother in the head with a hammer because I didn't want to wear something. And another youngster angered me, and I had a large camping knife, and I tried to stab him in the abdomen. And fortunately, under his clothing, he had a large metal belt buckle, and the knife blade struck it with such force that it broke. And he fled in terror. But I was more terrified than he was, because I realized I was trying to kill somebody. I had turned things around academically. I could see my pathway to becoming a physician. And yet I realized innately that with a temper like that, I would never achieve that goal. I would end up in jail, reform school, or the grave. And none of those appealed to me. And I said, Lord, you got to change me. I can't change this. I can't change the way that I am. I had tried. I was reading magazines. I was reading Psychology Today, all this stuff. And I saw where you could undergo behavioral modification, but that cost a lot of money. I didn't have any money. I said, Lord, if you don't change me, I'm done for. And there was a Bible, and I picked it up, and I started thumbing through, and I turned to the book of Proverbs. There were all these verses in there about anger. And it seemed like they were all written about me, and all these verses about fools, and it seemed like they were written about me. And as I prayed and read and thought about my life, the Lord made it clear to me that the reason I was angry so much is because I was selfish. Everything was about me, my, and I. They took my thing. They were in my space. I want this. They did this to me. And if you could step out of the center of the circle and let it be about somebody else, that you wouldn't be angry anymore. Do you know that was the last day that I ever had an outburst of anger? Because God changed it. And some people say, you've just learned how to hide it. But I'll tell you something. When God fixes a problem, he doesn't just do a paint job. He fixes it from the inside. It makes a difference. And a lot of people who know me now, they say, I can't believe that. I can't believe that about you, and that's because he does such a thorough job of changing. And anyone who wants that change in their life, who has that thing in their life that they can't get rid of, that they want to get rid of, there is a way around it. That's through the power of God. You may know somebody who's a drug addict, and all they seem to want to do is drugs all the time. And they think it's not a problem. Just give them their drugs. But you know what? I'll tell you something about drug addicts. If they could push a button and they would not be a drug addict anymore, they would wear that button out. A lot of times they won't admit that to you, but they would. And sometimes we're the bridge that helps those individuals in our society. And if we start thinking about what we can do to provide that pathway of success for other people, it will do something for us as well. And let us just end with a word of prayer. Kind Father in heaven, we're so thankful that you have provided us with your Holy Spirit, who can be with us at any time, in any way, to help us with whatever problems beset us, that can make us the vessels through which you can work to improve and save our society. And we ask that you would be with and near us all. Give us the direction in our lives and show us your will. And give us the willingness to follow it. In Jesus' name.